Oh hey, welcome back. Have you ever wondered what the least amount of money you can spend on an offset bridge upgrade is to get all the benefits of a bridge upgrade? Even if you're not very hard up, it might be difficult to convince a loved one or a spouse to spend 2 days' wages on a second-hand bridge for your electric guitar. That's certainly the case for me, and so I'm often looking for cheaper, better value alternatives to those kind of big, expensive bridge upgrades. Today we're exploring a DIY bridge upgrade option known as the Bobba Mod. We're going to explore 3 different levels of the Bobba Mod that you can do and assess what difference it makes to your guitar sound and performance and the aesthetic of your guitar as well. Of the Bobba Mod is that you take your standard offset bridge and you replace your 6 Jazzmaster, Jaguar or Mustang saddles with 3 Telecaster saddles. The first level would be to take your cheap Squier zinc alloy bridge like this and just replace the 6 saddles on here with 3 high quality steel or brass saddles. The second level of this mod would be to get a high quality steel bridge, something like the Hosco Fender Japan bridge, and modify this so that you have a high quality steel bridge plus high quality steel or brass saddles. The third level of this mod is to then take that modified new bridge and to shape it and change its appearance to look something more like a boutique custom bridge, something like the Mastery, a Avallon, a KMS, something like that. I still stand by the fact that a bridge upgrade is one of the most important and fundamental upgrades you can do on one of your Squier guitars, particularly an offset guitar, and not just for tuning stability. I think these bridges are okay at tuning stability. The real improvement in my book is actually a tonal improvement. Zinc alloy has a characteristic sound of a flubby, mushy, unpleasant character in the low end or the low mids to me. It just makes it kind of really bloated. I always find I can never get enough clarity in the low end with a zinc alloy bridge or a zinc alloy trem. The other characteristic part of the sound of zinc alloy is that it mutes the high end compared with something like steel or brass. So you end up with this sound that's kind of mushy and bloated and poorly defined in the low end and lacking high end clarity and snap and articulation. Some people would describe the change to a steel bridge as subtle. I think it's really significant and it has absolutely changed the way I relate with this guitar. It's changed the fundamental acoustic sound of the instrument and it's just made it such a joy to play compared with the dull and lifeless sound it had before. The Bobba Bridge will also potentially improve your intonation and arguably it's an aesthetic upgrade as well. In today's video I'm going to walk you through the process of how to perform the mod in the best possible way. There'll be timestamps in the description below. I'll then also do a sound comparison for you with the zinc alloy bridge with zinc alloy saddles versus the steel bridge with the steel Tone Ninja saddles. I bought the saddles that I went for because they look kind of like Mastery saddles if you kind of squint and have one eye shut. But they're also really nice high quality saddles. I believe the company name is Tone Ninja, but I got mine through the Philadelphia Luthier Supplies, something like that. I'll have a link in the description below. I don't get any money for it, but it will help you find the parts that I'm using if you're interested in using them yourself. All right then, let's go. Okay, so you can see here that I have my Fender Japan bridge, and the idea here is that we want to add our 3 tele saddles to the existing bridge. Now, the middle saddle there will line up just fine, and you could drill a hole directly in between your D and G string saddles. However, we actually can't drill on this side of the bridge if we want to get our saddles nice and close together and retain a 52mm string spacing. I made this mistake before on my practice bridge here, where I drilled the new saddle holes just perfectly in between the existing saddle holes on my Jaguar bridge. But what you'll find then is that you'll get a 55mm string spacing, and there'll be gaps in between your saddles, which we want to avoid. You can see here when you have the saddles touching that the screw holes for the E and B strings will actually be pretty close to the existing G string hole. So we're going to have to flip the bridge around and drill the holes on the other side. So here I've placed my tele saddle perfectly lined up with the existing D and G string saddles, and then I have marked using this very precise Sharpie either side of that saddle. Now, when you're drilling, it's very easy to drill incorrectly into metal. You can see here already that I have indented in the middle. I've made, I think I just jabbed it with a screwdriver to make an indentation where I want to drill the hole. And here I've just added some oil on the saddle. Now, this is how you do not want to drill your new bridge. You'll see here in a second that I did something really stupid. I put the bridge on the guitar and was just using the guitar as a workbench, and obviously I slipped and chipped the finish on my guitar. So we don't want to drill this way. Also, the technique that you use to drill into metal is really important as well. I just assumed that you want to drill kind of as fast as the drill will go into metal, and then that will get you through most efficiently. I knew you needed to put some kind of lubricant on the metal that you're using when you drill into metal to avoid blunting your drill, but actually I was using completely the wrong technique. If you drill really fast into metal, you'll actually just blunt your drill bit and ruin it, and it will take you ages and ages and ages to drill through the metal that you're working on. The correct technique is to put your drill onto the slowest speed, so onto 1 rather than 2, and to drill as slow as you possibly can and press down really hard. So what you would want to happen if you were drilling correctly, you would want big chunks of metal to be coming out of the bridge here as you really slowly drill into the bridge. If that happens, you know you're doing it right. If you drill too fast, you won't get through the metal and you'll also ruin your drill bit. So yeah, I'm not too precious about the finish on my guitars. I don't mind if they get chipped or dinged, so I thought it would be fine to drill using my guitar as a workbench. It's not a good idea. I don't care that I chipped it, but I wouldn't recommend doing it either. Now you can see here that the drill bit's spinning quite fast, and I'm just not getting in through the metal at all. Yeah, not getting anywhere there at all. My drill bit's just getting really hot and going blunt. To be fair, this drill bit was probably already blunt from when I used it before. Yep, there you go. And I slipped and chipped my guitar. So don't do that. Yep, that's not coming out. Okay, so I bought a new drill bit, and I watched a video, a really helpful video, which I'll link to below, on the correct way to drill through metal, which I really recommend you watch if you are planning on doing any kind of modifications to your guitar. Now you can see here that I have also now made a little indent where I want to drill for the E and A strings and the E and B strings as well. So one of the things you want to do is, once you have decided where your middle saddle will go, which should be perfectly in the middle. Oh yeah, here you go, you want your drill to be on speed number 1, not speed number 2. You can then line up your outer 2 saddles with that middle saddle and mark where those saddles should go on the bridge. Once again, you want to lubricate your drill bit. It's easiest just to put a dab of oil on the thing you're drilling. And here I'm using skateboard ball bearing lube because that's the only oil I had. I've even used in the past olive oil, and that also worked fine. Now, when you drill your hole, you want to start with a slightly smaller drill bit than what you're going to eventually end up with. The reason being is that a small drill bit will more easily be able to cut through the metal, and you'll be able to do a more precise hole that way as well. So you can see here on the right of that middle hole that I've drilled, I've scored a line where I want the intonation adjustment screw hole for that saddle to go. Okay, now this is the correct technique. You can see here that the drill is going incredibly slowly. You want to use a really slow drill speed here and press down really hard, and hopefully we should see some chunks of metal coming up. It's still quite slippery. You have to be careful. That's why I'm not drilling on my guitar now. Yeah, can you see those little bits of metal that are coming to the surface there on the oil? You should have nice chunks of metal. And basically the idea is to use the slowest speed possible that will get through the metal. There you go, and we're through, just like that. And so you want to repeat this process obviously for all three of the holes. Now, in terms of where you want to aim for with the placement of your saddle holes, you want to be as high up the lip of the bridge as possible. The reason for that is if you drill your holes too low, the intonation screw will then be sticking up at a really high angle. So you can see there when I just showed the bridge, all those chunks of metal that have come up, and that's exactly what we're looking for if we're drilling with a good technique. So if we drill too high on the lip here of the bridge, we are going to risk not having any metal left on the top. If we drill too low down on the bridge, we are going to risk having our intonation screws sticking up at an extreme angle like this, which isn't going to be, it's going to add extra stress on our bridge, and it's not going to be ideal for our operation. So ideally you want to have the holes you're drilling here an even height to the top lip of the bridge. I tried to do that, but I was slightly off, unfortunately. But it still works out fine. You can still get your saddles an even height across the board. It's obviously ideal if you can get all of your screw holes and equal height. So you can see we're drilling really slowly here, but you can see those flakes of metal coming off. That's exactly what we want, and it doesn't take too long to actually get all the way through. If I was still drilling with a really fast drill speed, like my first attempt, I would just never get through. The drill would just be spinning and spinning. The drill bit would get really hot and go blunt, and we wouldn't get through at all. Now you can see there that my E and A saddle is slightly higher up than my E and B saddle. It's a little bit annoying that I wasn't quite able to get them in equal height. The hole for the E and A strings is a pretty similar height to the hole for the D and G strings, but the E and B is just slightly lower, which is a bit frustrating. But like I said, it does all work out fine. We're only talking about a millimeter or so out, which we can easily compensate for with our saddle adjustment when we increase the height of the saddles. But it would be nice, obviously, if they were all the same height all the way along. Now what I'm doing here is I'm testing what size the existing screw holes for the Mustang saddles are, or for the Jazzmaster saddles. And I want to increase the holes I've drilled here to the same size as the screw hole for the intonation adjustment, which should be the same as the holes on the other side of the bridge. So I've chosen the correct drill bit that will just fit through there, and now we're just going to do the same process again, just to enlarge the holes. Again, going really slowly, making sure we don't damage our drill bit, and that we make a nice accurate hole. Okay, this time because I'm drilling into an existing hole, I just put a little bit of oil on the drill bit itself just to make sure that it goes through nicely, it doesn't overheat. And again, we're just using a really slow speed. You have to hold onto the bridge quite hard because it will try and rotate now. But we're just going through with a really slow speed just to enlarge that hole. Just like that, it takes about 5 seconds just to enlarge each hole to the diameter that we want. I was a little bit worried with this hole here for the E and A strings that it was a little bit too high, and that if I drilled through I was going to kind of break through the top of the bridge there. So I wanted to check whether the hole size I had already would be big enough so that I wouldn't have to make that hole bigger for the E and A strings, but unfortunately it wasn't big enough. Yeah, you can see here what I'm talking about the screws being different heights. So the one in the middle I got just about right. The one for the E and A strings is a little bit high, and the one for the B and E string is a little bit low. Like I said, we're talking a difference of a few millimeters here, but it would be nice, it would be ideal if we bought a bridge from a manufacturer, the holes would be at equal distance from the top lip of the bridge. It would be nice if we could make one that was the same, but it's not the end of the world. So for this hole, because I was concerned about it being too close to the top of the lip of the bridge, and I didn't want to break the bridge, because if I drilled too much, it's possible that I could break open the top of the bridge so that the hole would not have a top to it, if that makes sense, so I wouldn't be able to secure a screw in there. So with this one, rather than enlarging the drill hole, I decided just to file it out a little bit instead. Now you can see here what I was talking about ideally wanting the screws to be as high as possible on the lip of the bridge. So if you see here on the bass side, we have our saddle at a good height. Obviously I've matched the radius of the fretboard, and you can see here that the height adjustment screw here is not sticking above the top lip of the bridge. It's below the lip on this side. Again, if we look at the middle screw hole, it is just slightly poking over the top there. But it's not sticking up high enough for us to be able to feel it with our hand when we're playing. So this is the first one that we got at a really nice height there. It just barely sticks over the top of the lip here, and it's below the height of the saddle. The one in the middle, it sticks up slightly higher. Obviously this saddle is higher off the bridge because it's in the middle, and we radiused our bridge saddles to match the radius of our fretboard. But here, where the screw hole was really low, even though these two saddles here are in theory a similar height off the body, we've had to increase the height of this saddle more to get the radius matched. And because the screw is starting lower down on the body here, it has to stick up at more of an angle like this, rather than it being at more of a gentle angle like this, if that makes sense. So to get to the same height as these screws, because its starting point is lower on this back lip, it has to stick up more at an extreme angle, rather than being at a closer height to the back lip already, like these two, which can be at a more gentle angle. And so that is fine, but it is almost high enough to cause discomfort. It's actually fine. I don't think I would ever really feel that. I can just about feel it on my hand there. So if we had drilled that hole a little bit better and it was a little bit higher, we wouldn't have that problem. It would be at a more gentle angle like the other two, and I wouldn't feel it sticking up and touching the palm of my hand as I was playing. But I can't really feel that. It's only just sticking up above the height of the saddle. But that's why we want to get our saddles as high as possible on this back lip here. Okay, so this is phase one of the Bobba Bridge completed. We have our telly saddles here now nicely aligned, and they're all more or less touching each other, and we can intonate them just fine. Stage 3 then would be to reshape the bridge if we wanted to make it look a little bit more exotic or interesting. Now this is entirely aesthetic, and it isn't essential at all. And really, if I did this again, I don't know if I would bother to do all this reshaping work, because it does take a very long time kind of filing away the material. But I took a reference photo of the Mastery bridge, and the first thing that I noticed was that the lips on the side of the bridge here, the lip that the saddles would normally be in, that side of the bridge, and the lip that we have drilled our new saddle holes in, don't travel out so far to the edges on the Mastery design. So you can see here I'm using a file that has one non-abrasive side and 3 abrasive sides, so that I can rest the non-abrasive side of the saddle against the base of the bridge here, so that I'm not filing down into the bridge, I'm just filing across into those lips to shorten them a little bit, to make them look a bit more like an exotic fancy bridge. And I do think that looks a bit smarter, to be honest. It looks less clunky. Just looks a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more, I don't know, it looks a little bit nicer to me. And to be honest, I think just that alone would have been enough. But I kept going. Okay, so you can see here in this zoomed in shot what I've done there. You can see how far those lips go across on the right hand side. And you can see now that on the left they don't go out as far. And for some reason, it's not much difference in terms of the amount of material I've filed off, but somehow that does make it look more modern and interesting. Okay, yeah, so now what I've decided to do is to take the bridge down in between my new height adjustment screws. Oh, and wow, we fast forwarded very quickly there. So that took ages of filing. That was like an hour's filing to get it down like that. But you can see there that I've now taken out the material, but the strings will travel over. The reason you might want to do that is to prevent the strings from coming into contact with that lip of the bridge. The other thing I thought about the Mastery is that it often has kind of like a brushed metal kind of appearance. It's not super shiny, it often has kind of like a matte brush texture. And so I did this quite half-heartedly, but I thought, how can I make my bridge look a little bit more like that? And I did that just by rubbing it with a Brillo pad. I think in America you guys call them Scotch Brite pads. I don't know, I think that's a brand, I'm assuming. But in the UK we call them Brillo pads. I don't know what that means either. So yeah, I just rubbed it down with the Brillo pad. It's a very light abrasive, and then looks like I'm using some 600 grit wet and dry here. Really all I'm doing is scuffing it up. I'm not actually giving it a matte finish or a brushed metal finish. I probably could have done this a little bit more methodically, but I just wanted to take the shine off a little bit. I was experimenting on the bottom there because obviously no one's going to see the bottom, and I thought, yeah, that will do. So then I just went out the bridge a little bit all over just to take that shine down. So you can see that my intention with the taking material off the bridge where the strings travel over, is mainly aesthetic, let's be honest. But I think the intention with other bridges that do that, like a Avallon bridge or a Mastery bridge, is to just prevent any risk of the strings coming into contact with that lip of the bridge as they travel over it, which can sometimes happen. And the eagle-eyed among you will notice that I've only taken out material above the D, G and B strings, and that the low and high E still would have the potential to touch the lip, but fear not, because I spent ages more filing to change the shape of it even more. I think I could have got a nicer brushed metal kind of thing here with the inside of the bridge, and that's really the bit that you see the most. You don't really notice those lips of the bridge, or obviously the underside of the bridge. I started getting pains in my hand from gripping, in both my hands, from gripping the bridge for so long, and also from gripping the file and doing the filing motion for so long. If I had better tools, this is always my downfall. I have so many good plans about guitar mods that I could do. If I had better tools, I would be able to do a much better job. There you go, okay. That's the finished. Okay, so here's the finished product. Since the video, I swapped out these intonation adjustment screws for shorter screws of a more appropriate length, because before the screws were sticking out over here. So I found some shorter screws. I swapped those screws over so they're a more usable and suitable length. The other thing I did to make it somewhat like a Mastery, and actually I do this on almost all my guitars, is obviously one feature of the Mastery is that it's a non-rocking bridge. I have a non-rocking bridge. My KMS Jam bridge is a non-rocking bridge. It's growing on me. I'm actually starting to really like that bridge more and more as an alternative to the more traditional bridges. But I like my bridges ideally to have a little bit of movement. You can see there it's not moving loads like a traditional bridge might, but it still can rock a little bit. So what I typically do is I add these nylon washers to my bridge posts. Fender tries to charge 20 quid for these 2 nylon washers, but you can get them for a couple of quid off eBay or your preferred source of random bits and pieces. I'll put the dimensions that you need for these on here. So yeah, and so what happens is the washer fits perfectly more or less in the thimble hole, and the post fits reasonably snugly in the inner hole of the washer. And what it means is that the bridge can still rock a little bit. It's hard not to knock the camera. But the bridge can still rock a little bit, but not quite as much as before. And I guess it's a semi-mastery design in that regard. But I like having the rocking bridge. Obviously that's how it's intended to work. The thing I don't like is after a show or a long band practice, I used to find that my bridge would have rocked fully back and be stuck in its backmost position, and then wouldn't be rocking at all. And then my intonation would be out and bridge and trem wouldn't be working properly. So I'd be interested to know what you guys think of the aesthetic here. I like it. I know that it doesn't actually look like a mastery, and you might find having these holes over here slightly funny, but I think it looks interesting. It kind of definitely has that mastery-ish kind of look to it, I think. Certainly doesn't look like a traditional bridge. It looks like it's something that could be kind of a high-end or boutique design. You can see that the strings are nowhere near touching the back wall of the bridge, that back lip here. And if we look closely, some of the strings do come close to where that back lip of the bridge used to be. I don't know if they ever would have actually touched the back wall there, but it gives the bridge a bit more of a personal touch, I think, and a bit more of an interesting look. If you compare this bridge, for example, to this bridge, you might all prefer the Jazzmaster bridge, and that's fine, but I think this bridge is quite cool. Now, some people really don't like bridges with only 3 saddles because they say that the intonation adjustment is not as good because you can't adjust each saddle individually. But actually, this bridge is a massive improvement in intonation for me over the stock Squier bridge. This is the Squier bridge that was on this guitar, and you can see that all of the saddles, particularly the low E and G strings, were positioned as far back as physically possible. I think I might even have on this bridge had to chop the springs down in size a little bit on those E and G strings to maximize the intonation adjustment, because the intonation is quite far back on this guitar. It was okay. I got it in okay, but I needed more room for adjustment ideally. The problem is that these barrel saddles are kind of so fat. The string is leaving the saddle about here, halfway down the saddle, which means that if we had a skinnier saddle on the same size bridge, we could actually bring the intonation point back even further. You'll notice on this bridge where I've got the saddle intonated here, there is a lot more room for adjustment because the saddles are much skinnier. So you can see I could bring this saddle back quite a lot more before my intonation range is maxed out. So it's given me a lot more intonation adjustment room, and my E and Gs are nowhere near as far back as they were before. And always an important step is to get an experienced engineer to check your work and your design and to do some thorough testing to see if you've done a good job. So a sneeze of approval. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of this bridge? And who is this bridge for? Well, first of all, I think it would be fair enough to say that this bridge is possibly for someone who's looking to upgrade their bridge. They want better intonation, they want better tuning stability, they want a better sound, they want a different look, but they don't have the money to upgrade to one of those big name bridges, Stagetrem, Mastery, Avallon, something like that. I think this is a great option there. In the UK, if you go for the second version of the Bobba Mod, so buying a new bridge, stainless steel made in Japan bridge, plus the Tone Ninja saddles, to the UK cost me about £45 for everything. So for less than 50 quid, you're getting a pretty significant tone upgrade and an improvement in your bridge. In the US, you guys have everything cheaper than anywhere else in the world, so it might be even cheaper for you. I mean, I'm sure it would be even cheaper for you than that. So for someone who doesn't have much money but wants to upgrade their bridge and get the benefits of an upgraded bridge, I think this bridge idea, this modification, is definitely for you. Secondly, this bridge is for you if you enjoy modding your guitar. Some people just want to take a new part out the box and slot it straight in. If you're that kind of person, I would probably not recommend this unless you have a slightly adventurous side. This bridge option requires you enjoying fiddling with things, tinkering with things, making your own parts, enjoying that process which some people find frustrating and unnecessary. So definitely I would recommend trying this. Even if you don't need a new bridge, it's pretty cheap. You might want to try this just if you enjoy experimenting with your guitar. Thirdly, I would recommend this bridge to you if you are someone who feels confident using some basic tools. You're not going to be able to make this bridge if you're not happy using a drill. You're not going to be able to make this bridge if you're not happy potentially needing to do a bit of filing, doing some accurate marking and planning in terms of how do we align the saddles, where is the saddle placement going to be, and marking out where you're going to drill the holes, and feeling confident that you're going to be able to actually drill reasonably accurately according to those plans that you've made. So on the flip side, if you have loads of money, you don't need to do this bridge upgrade and you might just want to get a fancier big name bridge. Secondly, if you don't enjoy experimenting with your guitar and you just want something that you know is going to work, that you just take out the box and put straight on your guitar, this probably isn't for you. Thirdly, if you do not feel confident using any kind of basic tools, that's okay. This probably isn't for you unless you want to learn, but you might want to start out doing a more simple project. I actually bought a really cheap Chinese offset bridge to do my first experiments with this on. This whole bridge assembly, including the thimbles and the saddles and the springs and all the screws, cost me £6 from China to my front door. And yeah, I made some mistakes the first time. So if you are interested in doing this but you're not quite sure, I would recommend starting on a really cheap, horrible bridge and doing your first experiments there. So what are the positives of this bridge? Well, first of all, I would say absolutely tonal improvement for me is a really big improvement, a really big upgrade there. I really hate the sound of zinc alloy hardware, the sound that it gives to your guitar. I like a snappy, twangy, biting sound. That's why I like offset guitars. And I like a tight low end. That's why I like Jazzmasters, for example, because they have a really nice, tight, punchy low end. Any zinc alloy parts are just going to introduce flubbiness and a lack of clarity to the low end of your sound. So for me, the added twanginess and bite and brightness and sparkle and presence in the high end are all big bonuses to me. And the tighter low end and the increased clarity, again, massive win for me. Secondly, big improvement for me is intonation. This guitar requires the intonation to be set almost fully bottomed out, so adjusted as close to the tremolo side as possible, particularly on the low E and the G strings. I think this previous bridge was just about in with intonation, but it didn't allow for any potential changes in action, temperature, anything that might cause the guitar to change or move or need to be adjusted. I physically couldn't get these two saddles any further down if I needed to. Cool thing about the Toe Ninja saddles is because they are so much smaller and compact, is that you get a lot more movement of the saddle on the actual bridge. So there's a lot more room for adjustability, for fine tuning and tweaking the intonation. And that's really cool. That's really positive, especially I like to play a lot of the time quite high up the neck. I like playing with someone who has a more kind of low mid heavy, or someone playing a baritone and me playing higher up the neck. So having good intonation for me is really important. And thirdly, for me, this is entirely preference based, but I really like the look of a non-traditional bridge. I enjoy the look of a slightly more contemporary bridge. I personally really like the look of the Mastery. I really like the look of this KMS bridge. I kind of like the look of the Avallon, it's a bit chunky. I like the look of the offset bridge by High Spirit guitars. I like that more kind of contemporary look, and I think this definitely gets me towards that. You might think I've made something that looks really ugly and stupid, and that's fine. I like it. The cons of this bridge, obviously, that you have to do it yourself. There is room for error, and that means you might get a finished product that's not as professional as your cheap Squier bridge, or any of the other more expensive bridges. But I think that's just part of the guitar experimenting process. I think that's fine. There's room to learn, and you can end up with a really good, if you work carefully, you can come out with a really good, really nice bridge that is a massive improvement to your guitar for very little money. So there we are. I hope that was a useful guide into how to complete the Bobba Mod, or how to make a Bobba bridge and how not to. I'd be really interested to hear if you guys think it was a waste of time, or if it's turned out really well, and to hear whether you guys think I've made mine look really ugly, or if you agree that the kind of more contemporary look is desirable. Let me know if you're going to try doing the Bobba Bridge mod, and if you do make one, hit me up on Instagram, Mark B Guitar, and send me a photo. I'd love to see how yours comes out. Alright, well I think that kind of wraps everything up. In the future, I'm going to be doing a shootout with this bridge between the zinc alloy saddles, the stainless steel saddles that are on there, and some brass saddles, some Goto in-tune brass saddles, to kind of get an extra layer of understanding about what difference does experimenting with our bridge make. And I really like that the Bobba Bridge gives us more room to experiment with saddle material, saddle design, because there's lots of aftermarket tele saddles that we can do that with. So until next time, I hope you guys take it easy, look after yourselves, and I'll see you again soon.